Hello and welcome to our next webinar. This is the webinar on Lightning Forms, and thank you very much for joining. First of all, what I want to do is just introduce myself, who I am, and also, of course, Lightning Tools. This will just take a moment, and then we're going to jump straight into some action-packed demonstrations of how we can use Lightning Forms to customize the modern SharePoint list and library forms, of course, within SharePoint. First of all, let's take a look at who Lightning Tools is. So Lightning Tools, we're in our 14th year of providing products for Microsoft SharePoint and more recently also Microsoft Teams as well. The products that we provide are available for all versions of SharePoint on premises, as of course also SharePoint Online Classic and SharePoint Online Modern, and Microsoft Teams as well. So I founded the company back in 2007. We've got a UK headquarters, and we've also got a US office as well in Orlando, Florida. And that's a little bit about Lightning Tools. We are a Microsoft Gold partner. We're also certified by RENCORE for our coding standards and best practices, and that's to ISO standards. And what we do as a company is we basically provide different products that allow you to be more collaborative, more productive inside of SharePoint. So there's often things inside of SharePoint or Teams that are either challenging, time consuming, or just not possible. And that's where we come in. So we provide a number of different products, as I mentioned, that make those things possible or smoother. So right up in the top right-hand corner, around about 1 o'clock on the circle here, we've got a content roll-up tool, which is called the Lightning Conductor. It's an aggregation tool that will roll up SharePoint lists and libraries. It will also aggregate Microsoft Graph content or content coming from search, and you can display the results inside of SharePoint or also Teams, and you can stylize those results as well using things like conditional formatting and grouping and things like this. We've also got a discussion forum tool. So the discussion forum tool is known as Social Squared, and it's available also for Teams and SharePoint. And basically, if you think about what you cannot do in SharePoint discussion list, discussion forums, a Social Squared product makes that possible. So we have the ability to create lots of different forum groups and forums. You can collaborate in there, it gets people out of email, it helps people that are remote working, and you've got things like moderators and the ability to like and so on. And we're really happy to announce that this is also available as a personal app as well, which is something that's fairly new and announced by Microsoft, that was made available inside of Microsoft Teams recently. Of course, we've got the list forms editor, which is what we're going to be taking a look at today. We've got business connectivity servicing tools, so that allows us to connect to external data sources and bring that content into SharePoint, and not just for SQL, but for lots of different data sources. And we've also got some data visualization products as well. So that takes that data and allows you again to sort of stylize it and build reports easily throughout SharePoint. The final tool there is a permissions management tool, and what this is used for is to enable site owners or people with full control, site collection admins, SharePoint tenant admins, and so on, to be able to easily manage permissions in bulk and to be able to report on those permissions more effectively as well. So that's what we do as a company. We are going to be taking a look at Lightning Forms today. So Lightning Forms is available again for classic or modern SharePoint. In fact, I told you a little fib earlier on. I said all of our products work with every version of SharePoint. That's not true for Lightning Forms. So it works with SharePoint 2016, SharePoint 2019, and SharePoint Online. So you can use it for those three versions. And the reason why it's restricted to those is because it requires the app catalog for the deployment of the tool. Okay, so what does it do? Well, Lightning Forms is a contextual form designer. And what we mean by a contextual form designer is the fact that you don't have to go outside of your SharePoint environment. You can go through and design the look and feel of your SharePoint forms all throughout the SharePoint platform itself. So there's no need to go and fire up an external client or anything like that, where you design the form, you publish it, and then it's not quite what you're after. This is something that is you can take a SharePoint list form, like a new form or an edit form or a display form within any SharePoint list, and put it into edit mode. and you'll get the same layout where you can start to customize that, and it maintains the responsiveness that you have today inside the SharePoint modern forms, which is really important. So we've got the contextual form designer. When it comes to improving the form layouts, you've got the ability to insert things like tabs. You can, so therefore, rather than having a great big long stream of different fields to fill out, and you expect your users to scroll down and down and down, what we can do is basically organize the content, the fields a little bit better using tabs. You can also use multiple column forms if you want to do it that way as well, whilst still maintaining the responsive design of the modern form. So you can change the layout. We can change the initial size of the form and things like that as well. You can add logic to your fields. You can create buttons, which are buttons on the form, or you can also create form actions, which appear at the very top, like this one you can see here. And that allows us to just either customize what the existing save button does, or the existing save and close button, or you can add your own buttons that might do things like send an email or approve, start an approval workflow, or something like that. And none of that takes any code whatsoever, which is what you're going to see here today, and how you can use that more effectively. We also have things like cascading lookups, which we're going to take a look at. So this makes it great when you're filling out choice fields or lookup fields that rely on something else. So for example, we have if we were to choose a location such as US location or Florida location in our case, we'd expect to see another field with departments that belong to that location. We don't want to see every single department inside the organization. So we can start to filter out the lookup fields based on another value being entered somewhere else on the form. And we also have sublists. Those sublists enable us to create, if you like, a sort of master detail relationship or a one-to-many type relationship, where we've got dependency upon two lists to be completed as part of a solution. And we're going to demonstrate this today, where you may have something like a contact list as the one side of the one-to-many join, and you may have something like documents as a many side that are related to a contact. So it could be, employee contracts or customer contracts or something like that that are related. What we're going to do today is actually do expenses demonstration, where we're going to have an expense report with expense items in a sublist. Okay, so we have that capability. Like I say, there's no need to really write any code. You can write code if you want to, which is great and quite flexible, but most of the time you don't need to. So you can use our expression builder here, and most of the time the expressions you don't even use your keyboard for. You can just navigate the fields, you can use these operators and so on, and build out some really useful expressions using our own expression language for Lightning Forms, and it's very self-explanatory, which you'll see as we go through. Okay, so on that note, let's dive in. That's my last PowerPoint slide. You'll be hopefully happy to hear. All right, so in here we're going to take a look at a modern form, and as I mentioned, we're going to work with a specific scenario. The scenario is hopefully easy to understand and allows me to show off most of the features available in Lightning Forms. And I'm going to work with three different lists here. So we've got something called expense report, which is based off the contacts list template. And we've also got expense items. And for the expense items, we're yet to go through and add a couple of columns, which you'll see I do in just a moment. So expense report, if we just go into that initially, I've already created an item just as an example, but let's just have a look at the out-of-the-box forms first of all. So I'm going to click onto New, and this is over on the right-hand side here what the out-of-the-box modern form looks like. And of course, that out-of-the-box modern form, one of the key advantages of it is that it's responsive. So no matter how big or small we make this window, we can always see the fields, and it's going to respond to the size of the window. So that we're going to maintain as we go through. You can see here some of the things that we might want to do on the form, such as if I was to put in somebody's last name, let's just drop in here, Jared Carter, one of my colleagues, So notice here the full name doesn't get calculated. That's easy to do actually in SharePoint. You don't need our Lightning forms for that, but it's a good example of how to build a calculation, which I'm going to show you. So with this, we have to actually go through and type in Jarrett Carter. We've got all the standard fields here, and notice that we're having to scroll down quite a way within our form. And this is a really simple example. We speak to some customers that have sort of 200 or 300 fields in some of their forms. So we're going to improve upon the layout here to make it flow better. And another thing I wanted to show you is as we get down towards the bottom on this form, this is where we've got that location. So I can choose like UK as a location, but in the department, I see all of the departments, and not all of these departments are based in the UK. So what I'd like to do is have just those relevant departments show. If I was to choose UK, and if I was to choose US, I see the departments in the US, and I'm going to show you how to do that easily as well. Okay, so that's our form. What I also want to do is customize some of these buttons, and we'll be able to add our own buttons as well. And I also want to work with this expense items list. So expense items are actually created just a few minutes before this demonstration started. It's based on the custom list, and what I wanted to do is just show you the only field that it has at the moment is title. And what we're going to do is just add a bit more to that. So we've got the title. We could have a choice here. So I'm just using SharePoint out of the box to do this. So we'll have expense type, and in there we'll have food and travel and I don't know, drink, I guess, and save those. And then what we also want to do is have a numerical column. So we'll choose number, and I'm going to call this quantity. And I'm going to have a currency, which we're going to call price. Hopefully that up here. Let me try that. Oh, there we go. Let's just try price again. Okay, I think it took it. It didn't show in the view though. Oh, there we go. Just a bit slow. So we've got price, and then I also want tax. So the sales tax that we're dealing with here, and finally we're going to have total price. So last currency one is total price. So what I'm going to do with this is embed this on my expense report form. So the idea being is that we can create an expense report that needs to be approved and so on, but also you're not expected to go to two different lists to itemize your expenses. You can do that all on the same form. So in order to get started, what we'll do is we'll go back to site contents, and we'll go into expense report. And inside my expense report, at the very top here where it says Lightning Forms Customization Dialog, we're going to click onto that. And only designers will be able to do this. So you'll need to have design permissions. But in here, what I'm going to do is customize the new form initially. So we've got the new form, the edit form, and the display form. So I'm going to click onto customize to customize the new form, and that will launch the design experience for me. Okay, so we've got the design experience loaded, and what we can do right at the very top left-hand corner here is go into the form settings, and first of all, just change the initial size of that form. So we've got small, medium, large, or full screen. And I'm going to go up to a large one because we're going to start to insert some tabs on here. So we need a little bit of extra width on the size of the form initially, but maintain again that responsive design. So the next thing we can do is also, well, we can either work with tabs or we can work with columns, entirely up to you. So here we can add a new section. Here we can add a new section where I can choose 1 column, 2 column, or 3 columns. So if I go with 2 columns, notice how we've now got these 2 columns here, and we can go through and drag the fields that we want in those columns into those columns. So we can have the last name, first name, and full name in there. And I'm just going to scroll down to where we've got some, the report date. So I'm going to drag this report date up. Sorry, I'm zoomed in a little bit here. Let's just bring that up. There's actually a quicker way to do this, but hey, I've started now. So we'll drag that up here and into the second column. So we'll drop that there. There we go. So this is where we're starting to sort of work with those multiple columns. So the next thing we can do is also insert some tabs. And the tabs are useful for those sorts of fields that you're not necessarily always going to be filling out. So in here, we'll go through and select the tabs. So we've got a tab control where I can double click and just enter the tab name, and we can add another tab as well. So I'm going to have address details, and I'm also going to have approval in here as well. So they're the two tabs, and let me just drag email address up there. There we go. Maybe company as well. Okay, so inside the address detail, I'm just going to get rid of some of these. So let's drop the phone numbers. We'll get rid of fax number. Don't think anybody has that anymore. And also the address, city, state, and zip. And of course the region can go in there as well. Maybe even the website address, etc. And then on the other tab here, the approval tab, we could add the notes, the total claim amount, and we've also got, well, I'll leave those there at the bottom there. So we've got the location department, whether it's approved or not. I'm also going to stick on that approval form and who the approver email address is. Okay, and finally, I'm just going to delete that attachments section. So that's a little bit of a better layout, and we could spend a bit more time on it, obviously. What I'm going to do is just save and close it, just so that you can see that change being made. So as we hit new now, notice how we've got that wider initial form. I've got the two columns at the top here, and we've got the two tabs. So I've got the address details and the approval section with the location and department at the bottom. Okay, so winning so far. Let's go back into the design experience. So I can always tell when a form's been customized. Notice that. If we go back into the new form design, and we'll start to add a little bit more logic to the form now we've improved the layout. So one of the things we could do is come in here and deal with this cascading lookup. So here we've got the location and the department. How this is going to work is I've actually got another list. So I'm just going to open this up to show you. And that other list is called the lookup department. And that lookup department, as you can see, it's just got two columns. One contains either US or UK, and then we've got the departments belonging to each one. So in order to do this cascading lookup, what we're basically going to do is look up from this list, which is already being done, and then we're going to filter based on the location that the user selects on the form itself. So if they choose US, we'll see just sales, marketing, HR. If they choose UK, we'll see sales, technical support, and research and development. Currently, all of those being displayed. Okay, so to do that, we are going to spend the time on the department field here. We'll click onto this field configuration and notice that we've got a camel lookup. Now you don't have to start writing camel, so don't worry. All we need to do is click onto the little filter icon, and in here we click onto the plus button to add a query. Notice how it's already got the department title, because that's where I'm looking up from, and I'm going to say is equal to something on the form. So we've got the form input, or I could hard code a value or an expression. So I'm just going to go with the form input. And the form input is this field here, the location. So I'll choose the location field on here, save that. Let's OK it, save and close the form, and we'll give it a little go. So now when I hit new, on our form here, if we scroll down, I can choose the location. So I choose UK, and notice department just shows me sales, tech support, or research and development, And if I change that to US, now I have sales, marketing, and HR. Okay, so our cascading lookup is now working. So cancel that list item and go back into the form design for a bit more logic. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is work with the sublist, and that's where I'm going to embed the other list onto this form. So here on the form, we click onto the add button again. We've got all the different fields that make up this form. And then we've got some other controls that we can work with, and we'll work with some of those shortly. But then I also have the lists and libraries that belong to this site as well. And in here, we've got the expense items. So I'm going to choose the expense items list, and that's now embedded on my form. And what I want to do, you saw me create the fields on this form. It only had a title field to begin with, and then we added the others. But I'm going to say I want to use this as a sub-item. And for the sub-item to work, I need to have some form of relationship between the two lists, and that is through a lookup column, which I don't yet have. So all I need to do here is click onto the plus, and that's going to create a new column for me called lookup to expense report. So we'll add that, and that now gets created. You can also choose the forms that the expense item is going to use for new items and editing existing items, so we could customize those as well. I'm just going to use those as the out-of-the-box forms initially. We can also show or hide some of these controls, so like show header, show search, show command bar for that embedded list, all of which is optional. And you've got a bit of header text as well, which says expense item, so we can change that if need be. So I'll OK that. And once again, let's hit save and close. And we'll go through, create a new item. Okay, so let's add, I don't think we added Jared eventually, so I think I cancelled that one. So I'll add in Jared. There we go, so we've got the details there, and I'm just going to fill out the required ones. So we've already seen our department thing working, and then at the bottom here is where we've got the expense items. So I can create a new item, and that item being a burger. Jared loves his burgers, so we'll probably stick them down for 10. Maybe they cost like $15 each because they're big burgers. So I made my maths harder. Let's keep it easy. There we go. So let's just say that's the sales tax on each one, and I can figure out the total value here. Okay, and hit save. So we've got that embedded as an item here, and we can create another one as well, which will be a flight. So we choose travel. That's one of those. 1,000. And currently we're just having to do this manually. Okay, so we can add that, and that becomes the next sub item. So when we hit save, it creates the Jared Carter expense report. And if we were to go and navigate to the expense items, notice how we've got those items in here, and they are related to the expense report via that lookup column. Okay, so now we want to add a bit of logic to that. And what I want to do is take the total price here and roll that up to the expense report. So we're going to go back to the expense report list. Could have just gone to another tab perhaps. Let's just close some of those down. There we go. And again, launch the customization dialog. Okay, so we're back into the design, and what I want to do is take this column here, the total price column, add all the rows up, and drop the total in here for me. So the way that I'm going to do that is by clicking onto this configure expressions link, and that gives me all the different expressions that I can configure. So we've got whether or not the field is visible. We're going to do a bit of work as an example for that in a moment. Whether it's enabled, we've got the initial value, the calculated value, required, validation, and validation text. So what we're going to do is actually set this a calculated field. So we'll click into the parentheses there for the calculation. That's launched the expression builder. And I'm just going to use my mouse. My left hand is in my pocket. There we go. So I'll scroll down here. You can see there we've got sublists. So I'm just going to expand sublists. There's the only sublist on the form, which is called expense items. So we'll expand that. And in here, we've got total price, which I'm going to expand. And in there is sum. So I'm going to do a sum rather than an average, min, count, or max. So we double click into that. There's my expression built. We can hit save, and it's stored that expression there in the calculated property of that field. So we're taking this total price column, adding up all the rows that are relevant to this expense report, and placing them here inside the total claim section. Now, before we save and test this again, let's just have a look at some of the other things. So we've got this approved field. So we don't want employees coming in and approving their own expenses. That would be disastrous. So what we can do here is just click onto this configure expressions again. And in here, we've got who it's visible to, but also who it's enabled for. Now, ideally, we'd work with enabled. We'd go through and build an expression to say whether or not this is enabled. In fact, let's do that. Sorry, we'll do this. So we want to show the control, but we will make it impossible to change it unless you're an approver. So how do we do that? So as we scroll down, as well as all the different fields here inside the expression builder that make up this form, we've got the context objects. And under context objects, I've got information about the current form. So I can tell, I've got these Boolean fields where I can tell whether it's a display form, an edit form, or a new form, if it's a sublist form, etc. I've also got things like item ID, which is useful for some of the email actions that we're going to be doing shortly. Page as well, so the page culture, query strings, things like that. We've got the site, which means the site collection, and we've got the web, which means the site, and we've got the user. So under the user, I'm going to check whether the user is a member of a certain group. So I double click into that, and we put in the name of the group in here, which is going to be called approvers. Okay, so with that, I can hit save, and that's it. This should be disabled unless you are a member of that group called approvers. Okay, we'll test that shortly as well. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is add some other logic. Now there's some save and cancel buttons on here. Now the save button is just going to save it, and that's it. Or save it and then it'll close it. The cancel button is just going to close it without saving it. What I want to do is have a little bit more behind that. So what I can do is take the save button here and click this little bolt of lightning. And in there, we can see the actions that this button is performing. So we've got the save first of all, and then the close. Really straightforward. So what I'm going to do is add another action, and that action can be any one of these. So we've got add a list item, close a form, delete a list item, execute script, in which case you can write any JavaScript you like. We've got a HTTP request, which is useful for calling things like a flow. We've got open list form, open web page, reload, save form, send email, etc., etc. And we're going to do a send email. So who do I want to send the email as? The current user, the person who is requesting the expenses. So I'm going to go to the user email address. There we go. So that's who it's going to be sent from. Who it's going to be sent to is going to be whoever is in this approver email field. So in there, we can just go to the approver email field and double click onto that, and that's done. And then we could just put in here, please approve my expenses. And again, we could write out a body, and we could create a little hyperlink there as well to the item if we wanted to. Okay, so that's that, and then we could also add another action if we wanted to, and so on in there. So that's my save button modified, but the user could also, at the very top of the form, click save. So these are the form actions. So I can go into the, sorry, that's form settings. I can go into the form actions. There's the save button, and we could do the same thing there as well, configure those actions. So in here, we'll just one more time add the send email from the current user and to the approver email and say, please approve expenses. Here are my expenses. Okay, so we've done that. What I can also do here is add another form action. So I'm going to click onto plus a form action. We can set an icon. So I'm going to choose a tick for this one, or a check mark. And in there we'll have the word approve expenses. Okay, who do we want to be able to see this? Well, approvers. So I'm just going to leave that blank, but if we wanted to, we could make sure that only approvers see that. And then we go to configure actions. And the action that I'm going to do here is to modify a field value. So set form field value, and that is the approved field, and we're going to set that value to yes. Okay, so we could do that, and then of course we could be polite about this and send an email from the approver email to the current user, or to the user actually in the form. There we go, and say expenses approved. And if we wanted to, we could also drop on that notes field. Which is in there somewhere. Notes. There we go. Okay. So there we go. We'll hit save. We'll OK that button. So we've now got approve expenses as well as save and cancel. And let's save and close this form and give it another run. So in here, let's click onto new. And the last name here can be Usia. So Sandy. Again, I could calculate that easily. I've got the report date, email address, which we do need. So let's put Sandy at Lightning Tools product demo.onmicrosoft.com. Okay, and so we've got our notes. So yeah, oh, that was a lot of burgers. There we go. Total claim. Notice the approved is disabled because I am not a member of that approver field. In here, we can also have the demo at Lightning Tools product demo.onmicrosoft.com, which is my email. We'll choose a location, department, some expense items. So in here we'll have, I don't know, seafood. Sandy doesn't eat as much, but what she does eat costs a lot more. There we go. So we'll add all that up. So we've got that one in there. And if we put in a flight, okay, and we'll save that one. What you should see is getting this total claim calculated as well. So it's rolling up the results from this and putting that into the total claim field. And then we can either hit the save up here or the save down there. So we'll hit the save down there. So that has saved the item, and hopefully in a second we'll get an email. Or not. Unless I got my logic wrong there, we should get an email. Yeah, we've got that item. So now I can go back into it and obviously approve it and so on as well. But that brings me on to another thing, because to go back into it and approve it, we are actually looking at a different form. That's the edit form or the display form, which currently we've not yet customized. So if I was to click onto the last name field, we're back to, for the display form, the default form look and feel, not the customized form that we have under the new item. So what we're going to do is actually go back into the new form, and we're going to save that configuration. Okay, so in here we can go down to export the form. Okay, so that's exported down here. Just show that in a folder. There we go. So it's called expense report into my downloads. So we'll save and close this one. Okay, and we'll go back into the form customization and customize the display form. And then we will go through and import the configuration. And there's the configuration that we're going to import. There we go. We've now got the exact same layout in our display form to what we had. In the display form than what we had in the new form. So now I can click onto Sandy Usia, and there we go. There's our customized form that we can just read this time. And if I want to, I can go through and approve those expenses. Oh, it didn't send the email. I think because that email doesn't actually exist. I was wondering that when I put it in there. Had that happened, that would be set to approved. Anyway, the demo gods got me. Let's just cancel that one. But that's what the approver would do. I just need to have a valid email address in there, and that one was not valid. Okay, so I think I've covered everything I wanted to show you in Lightning Forms. So what we'll do is just pull up a couple of links where you can go and download this and find out a little bit more about the pricing or anything else. So under the for SharePoint Online, if you're using the modern form designer, then there's a link to that. So lightningtools.com. You can actually click onto products. If you just go to lightningtools.com, click onto products, and you'll see the SharePoint Modern Form Designer. So you can download it from there, and that also contains all the pricing information and so on that you need. If you're working in SharePoint on-prem, like SharePoint 2016 or SharePoint 2019, SharePoint 2016, you're going to be using classic forms. So here's a classic form version of this. If you're using 2019, then you've got the choice of either you might need either because some of the lists in 2019 are classic and some are modern. So depending on which one you're working with. Okay, so I guess if you have any questions, feel free to use the chat window, or I can unmute you, depending on what you want to do. So if anybody does have a question, just raise your hand and I can unmute you. You can ask your question, or use the chat window, type your question in there. I'll just give 10 seconds or so for that to happen. Or you can also use my email address. So if you've got any questions that come up later on, feel free to email brett@lightningtools.com. So that's Brett, BRETT, @lightningtools.com. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions. Okay, in that case, thank you everybody for attending. I hope you found it useful, and I look forward to seeing you on the next webinar. Take care.